Okay, today I'm just going to show you how to make a hat. We're going to use the Lacy Trellis stitch, which is the one right here for the body. This is what it looks like. I used it here in the scarf, and I'm making the hat to match. And then the edge treatment that I have right here, we're going to use in the hat because this gives you a really nice cast on. And it looks really nice on the edge of the hat to do this stitch to blend in with the cast on. So the brim we're going to do is a brim that I call E-Wrap in 2. And it's just right here on the brim of this hat. It's a brim that comes in nice and snug so it fits you, and then the rest of the hat here is a lot more stretchy and loose. And so it does knit up small. So I'm using a 3/4 inch 36 peg loom, and that actually fits me really good with my small head. So if you have a small head or a small to medium head, it would also fit. But if you have a medium to large head, you're going to want to use a bigger loom than this. So if you're using 3/4 inch, you'd be using the 41 peg loom or a 40 peg loom, whatever you have. And it will fit you just fine. Okay, so we'll get started. Okay, I'll post the color that I'm using of the James C. Brett yarn. James C. Brett is a thinner bulky, kind of similar to Michael's Barcelona or premium puzzle yarn. It's thinner than a yarn like Charisma. So that will show you, by showing you that hat there, I showed you kind of what this will look like on this size of loom with a thinner bulky. Okay, so what I did was I made a slip knot, and then what I do is I just measure this until I get this part of the slip knot being the length that I want for the hat. And I wanted 9 inches long for this hat, so this is 9 inches long, and it just gives me a little bit of a gauge, so when I'm knitting and I get down to there, I know that I've got the right length of hat and I don't have to constantly measure. I can always kind of see whereabouts I'm at. So it's just one way of making that easy. So now what you do is you just take your yarn hook, put it down as if you're going to do a purl, just down into the loop and up. This is a chain cast on that we're using. It's one of the chain cast ons. And then we just go behind this peg. I'll put this down because we're just going to use our fingers now. And you've got the loop here, and you just take the working yarn and pull it through, making a new loop here. Behind, pull the working yarn through and snugging it up as you go, and going behind, pull the working yarn through, snugging it up. Then you're just going to want to check and make sure you're not too tight. You want it snug, but not so tight you can't get it over, that you've gotten too tight. And this all looks good. I could easily pull that over, and yet it's still snug, so that's really good. And then we just keep doing that, snugging it up. You can do it in one motion. I like doing it in kind of 3 motions like this. It just sort of helps me to get my tension right. And so we're just going to do that all the way around the loom. So I'll meet you up when we get close to the end, and I'll show you how to finish off the cast on. Okay, so here I am coming to the end, and I just do the last one. And then I take the loop, put it over peg 1, and just pull it. And then what we do is we just take the bottom loop here and knit it over, and now it's all secured. Now this cast on is kind of a few row process to get that nice little chain. So what we're going to do next is do a row of purl, then a row of owl eye wrap, and then another row of purl, and that will be our cast on. So to purl, peg down into the yarn, just like that, top of the peg down, pull the yarn, then you just pull the yarn through. You got a loop, and then you hold on to this and pull it off and just place it on and snug it up a little bit. And that's all. Go back down, scoop up the working yarn, up and over. There's your purl. Let's do it really, really slow. There you go. You scoop up the yarn, Then this loop is going to have to go on the peg, so you just go up and snug it up a little bit. Okay, so we're just going to purl all the way around to this peg, and then I'll meet you back there. Okay, so I've purled all the way around, and now we're going to do the E-wrap. I mean the owl eye. So we're going to do the owl eye for one row, and then it'll be a row purl after that. So for the owl eye, you're going to wrap over peg 1 and just knit it over. Now you're going to go back over peg 1 by going behind peg 1, in front of it, and over peg 2, and then just knitting them off. And you're going to do this nice and loose. Okay, so these are nice and loose. And then behind peg 1, over peg 2. And as you see, this is nice and loose. And then just knit them off. And you're at peg 1 again. You're always at peg 1. Wherever the working yarn is your peg 1. You'll always know what direction you're going with owl eye too, because it's going to be pointing towards the direction you're going to be going. You're always going to just wrap behind it, over peg 1 and 2, knit them off. Very easy to do. Behind peg 1, over peg 2, knit them off. So we're just going to go all the way around the hat till we hit here, and I'll meet you when I get close to the end here and show you how to finish off the row. Okay, so here we are near the end of the row, and I'm just doing owl eye over these 2 pegs. Okay, so this one, all the rest of stitches have got 2 pegs on them. Once we knit this one over, it has 1 stitch on it, so we're going to want to make sure we wrap it again. Just like that. We're not going to wrap that peg because we're doing a different stitch, and wrap it over. And that way we'll never get holes, because all the pegs that should have 2 stitches have 2 stitches. And then we're going to do our last row of purl. And we're here to start at peg 1. We scoop under, do the purl, and this is the last bit of purl in the whole hat. That's it. There's just the 2 rows of purl, and that's to give us that really nice cast on edge. And it's owl eye with purl is a kind of a curly stitch. It looks like waves. So when you have them together, it leaves you with this nice looking chain look. And it's going to look really good on the outside of the hat. So we'll finish the row of purl, and I'll meet you up here, and we'll start on the brim. Okay, and that's it, and that's all our part of our cast on, and that's what it's going to look like. So you see it has this real chain kind of a look in here, and it's going to be, we'll see it more as it gets looser, but we now do the brim, and that's the E-wrap in 2. And the reason I named it E-wrap in 2 is it's made out of a certain way of doing E-wraps over 2 pegs, and I figured someone else might come up with that independently, because after all, that's just E-wrapping 2 pegs. So I thought a name like E-wrap in 2 pretty much tells you what it is. So what you're doing is you're going to be E-wrapping 2 pegs together like that, and you're going to alternate it the next row, so you'll be wrapping different 2 pegs together. And so that's how we do the E-wrap in 2 stitch. So the name really works for it. So the first thing we're going to do is wrap 1 and 2 together. So we come behind peg 1 and 2, and then we go in front of peg 1 and 2 and come behind them, back over to behind peg 4, and then wrap 4 and 3 together. So we're just going to be wrapping like that, behind, over. So we have every 2 pegs. I'll come up closer so you can see it. So 1 and 2 are wrapped together, 3 and 4 are wrapped together, 5 and 6 are wrapped together. And so these 2 aren't wrapped together, but they have the yarn behind that's connecting the piece. And so we're going to go all the way around, and we'll be ending with the 2 pegs that are right here, because we have an even loom. This has an even amount of pegs. If you're working on, for example, the 41 peg loom, you're going to have an extra peg here that you can't wrap. So you don't wrap it this time around. The next time around, you will be wrapping it, and you'll be wrapping it with this peg. So you'll be wrapping those two together. Well, let's see, no, it's the last one. Well, when we come up, you'll have that one peg left, and you'll have to wrap it, and the last two we wrap will be these two. So yeah, then you'll just wrap that one with this one. Sorry about that. You'll be wrapping that one with this one because your yarn have wrapped here, and then you'll want to wrap that around and this one. But that'll be for the next row because this one already has the stitches on. So if you're on uneven loom, it's kind of a bit easier to do this stitch, but you can do it on either. It works on either. Okay, so we're just going to keep going now. The other thing to really remember about this is you want to keep it really, really loose, because as you go around and alternate them, it does start to tighten up because you'll be tightening over these loose wraps with the under wraps, and it can start to get really tight on you. So you want to keep it loose. So once you've gone about this far, it's good to go back and check and make sure you're really loose. So loose that it could almost fall off. That's how loose we want it. And if you find it's not loose enough, you can just pull this, and you can keep loosening all the way back. Get it really, really loose. So just make sure you're loose and go back and check and make sure before you knit it off that it's all really loose. So you just keep wrapping. All the way around. And checking, and I'm nice and loose. I've done this a lot, so I know I'm loose. We come up, and there we go. And because we're even, we've got every two peg pairs matched up. If we were odd, we'd have the one peg pair there. Then we're going to knit them all off, and then when we start, we're going to want to knit these two pegs together for our odd rows. I call it the even row because we got 1 and 2. And the odd row because we're working with the last peg and the first peg. So if you've got the extra peg there, you're gonna, for your odd row, always be wrapping that last peg with this peg. Okay, so we're just gonna knit it all off, and if I knit this is gonna hold my peg in place, and I can see that my yarn, I might as well knit this one off too to really hold it in place. I'm going to see that my yarn is going over these pegs when I start again. So that's going to help me to know that I did an even row. If I had to put my work down after I'd knitted off everything, I could see that it was coming from this peg, and so that I had wrapped these two pegs together. Then we're just going to knit it off. So I'll just pause while I knit it off because that's going to be boring to watch me knit off the whole. Okay, they're all knitted off. So now I'm going to wrap these two pegs together, and if you've got the odd peg loom, you're going to be wrapping the odd peg with peg 1. And we just go over very loose, and now we'll be wrapping these together. Nice and loose, going back and checking and making sure you're loose and loosening it if you need to. This is really going to help you learn to knit loose if you're a tight knitter, because you can go back and fix it, and it helps you to practice so you get really good at loose knitting. It's really easier on your hand and arm and everything to knit loose. It also helps to have a nice big hook like this. Okay, so now when we knit them off, we're going to be down here, and we're going to want to come up and wrap these two pegs again. So we always want to go odd, then even, then odd, then even. So I'm just going to do this. There, and then just knit them off. And again, we're just going to knit off, and I'll meet you back up. Okay, so now I've wrapped all the way around and I want to wrap those two pegs together again. And as you see, I'm going to have to come down pretty far, and that starts to happen on every one of your second rows. So what I like to do, I'd rather be coming from here to have about the same width, so this string won't be so long here when it comes over. So you can just lift this up and put the working yarn behind. That's one method of doing this. And then as we come back over here to wrap these two, then this yarn isn't so long. So there's other methods to do it, but we only have to do one every 2 rows. So I think it's just easy to just do that one as teach you the other method. So we come back and we're going to be even again. So we're wrapping peg 1 and 2. 3 and 4, and basically that's all it is. So I'm going to do a few rows and get back to you. So you're just going to be alternating and always start with peg 1 and 2 and start with the last peg that you did. Even if you're on an uneven one, it'll be 1 here. It won't have been wrapped, but always start out on even, then odd, then even, then odd. And if your string looks like it's too long, just put it behind the next peg over, and then the string won't be too long and it will blend in and you won't even see it. So yeah, I'm going to do a brim. I'm going to go about 1.5 inches. That's where I like my brims. You can go less or more. You can actually have a brimless style out of this, or what looks brimless, just by doing just these rows or a couple more. And if you're finding you get tight, you might want a shorter brim. The important thing is the hat fits you where it is on your head. If the rest of it's loose, it's okay. So decide how long you want it, and then we'll just meet up. Okay, I did a total of 9 rows. And this got me this big, which is plenty big enough for the brim for me. I think it's about 2 inches. And I like mine at least 1.5, so here we go. Yeah, we're at 2. So I like to end on an even row for the simple reason that your working yarn's coming from here, so it's not far to get over to the first peg. If you do end up here on an odd row, you will have to probably tuck it under the one peg the way I showed you, so that you don't have such a long string coming up. Now we're going to do a row of owl eye, and this stitch, you already know all the stitches in it, so this is going to be quite easy for you. Now it looks really nice, right? It looks there's all my yarn stuff over there. It looks like this stitch right here. Going to be a slight bit different because it's round, and here I was flat, so you're going back and forth, so it'll be a little bit more trellis like. But that's the stitch, and all we do is 1 row of E-wrap, 1 row of wrap 2 pegs. So because we ended with all these E-wrap rows, we're going to do a row of owl eye, and then we're going to come back and wrap 2 pegs, and we'll always be wrapping the same 2 pegs now to start. We'll always be starting with the even 1 and 2. So there we go. And some tips to actually help you when you're finishing off doing this brim, if you lose which ones to wrap, is you can look at them, and as you can see when you're looking at them, these 2 pegs are wrapped together. You can see they're wrapped right together, and then there's nothing here to wrap them together, and then again they're wrapped together right up here. So you can tell these were the pegs that were wrapped. So the next row you'll always wrap those 2 pegs. Also, you'll know if you do a wrong row, so you can catch it right away, because you'll start getting a big it all going in kind of like a big funny chain thing, and it won't be looking like this pattern here. And then you'll know if you forgot to alternate right away. So now we're going to do our row of owl eye. Oh, and before we do that, I should show you how nice this is looking, so you see how nice it is to do the brim this way. Okay, see how close I can get so you can see this. So this is the edge, this is the chain that's going to go on our head when we're wearing it, and it's going to look like this. Really nice. See, no loose loops. And this is the edge from the cast on here. It just looks like a nice little chain. So there you go. Okay, now we'll do our row of owl eye, and again, when we start owl eye, we start on peg 1 and we just wrap peg 1, and then we go over peg 1 again and wrap peg 2. Want to make sure there's 2 wraps on peg 1. Wrap it over. Wrap peg 1, behind peg 1, over peg 2. Okay, so we're going to do that for a row, and I'll meet you up there. Okay, so we're just coming to the end of the row and wrapping our peg 1 over our peg 2, and then wrapping and coming over peg 1, and then that's it. We're just going to stay at peg 1 and we're going to begin to do our next row, and our next row is just wrapping 2 pegs over peg 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and just like we were doing in the brim. And that's all we're going to be doing. 1 row of wrapping 2 pegs and 1 row of owl eye. So it's a very easy stitch. If you have problems figuring out how to keep your tension loose in the brim, you could always do your normal brim you're used to doing, if you do a rib brim or something like that, and then do your body like this. But I really like using that cast on, or that brim, with these type of stitches. I really like the way they go together. Okay, so now they're all wrapped and we're just going to knit them over. And our working yarn's going to be here, so whenever we start to do our owl eye, we just come over here and do our owl eye. So we're just going to work ahead now, and that's your pattern. 1 row of owl eye, 1 row of wrap 2 pegs, and then back 1 row of owl eye, 1 row of wrap 2 pegs, and you go you go as long as you want, leaving about 1/2 inch for finishing off and closing up the hat. But I'll go a ways up and show you how it looks. Okay, just taking a look at where we are so far. So now that I've gone further down, you can see the brim in here with the design. And here's this starting to come in here, and so here's this stitch, and it's got all these little flower looking things in here. I always think they kind of look like, right? And it's stretched tight on here, so it's going to come in quite a bit when it's done. Be a little less lacy, but it is a lacy looking hat. So there's where we are so far. And if I check my length with my string that I left here, there we go. You can see that got quite a bit of this hat done already for me, but you're going to do it your size too. So you're just going to keep going up, and for me, I'm going to go up to about 8.5 because I wanted to end the hat at 9. So I'll meet you up there when your hat is the length, pretty close to the length you want it, and you're just going to leave about 1/2 inch or so for the bind off. And okay, I'll see you then. Okay, so here I am. I've done this much of the hat, and my little cord, when I wrap it up, shows me there's only about 1/2 inch left. So I take the measuring tape and measure it, and I'm just going to go up here and hold it right about there and just let it come down, and there we go. Hat to come down, just relaxed kinda, and I am at about 8.5. And so that is where I'm going to start doing the stuff to bind off. Now the bind off I'm going to do is just the same bind off that I did in this hat, and I softened it up a bit so it wouldn't be a really hard bind off. It would be fairly flat. Yeah, so I'm just going to do that same bind off. So all we have to do now is do 4 rows of E-wrap. And there we go. Oh yeah, just E-wrap around 1 peg, And so we're just going to do 4 rows of E-wrapping around one peg and knitting it off. So I'll meet you up there when you've got your 4 rows. Okay, now that we've got those rows of E-wrap, our 4 rows of E-wrap, all we're going to do is take our yarn off peg 1, move it on to peg 2, off of 3, move it on to peg 4. So we're just going to keep moving loops over so that we only have half the number of loops left. And then when we're done, you can knit it off, or you can just knit them off now to hold them on more securely as soon as you move them. And I'm just going to knit them off, but I can also just move them all and then knit them off too. And we are really close to being done. And we are at the working yarn. And just over we go. Okay, now all we're going to do is take our yarn, wrap it around the loom about 1.5 times, just something like that, and then just cut it. And then you can use your loom hook to do this. You can just take your loom hook and be putting it under the yarn to collect it, but I like to use a needle, so I'm just going to take a needle. And of course the only needle I find is the one that's hard to thread because the eye hole is too small, but there it goes. Okay, and then I'm just going to go and scoop them up. Now, this hat really doesn't take very long to make. My hubby went to work, and he's only going to work for about 5 hours today, and he left, and I had something to eat. Then I started to make this video. I flubbed it up twice, had to restart the whole thing, and here I am finishing it off now, and he's still not home, so it really doesn't take very long to make. Very fast. And there we are, and I'm just going to go back into the very first one and then just take them all off, pop them off. If you're too tight, you can pop them. If they're tight for you, just pop them over with the loom hook, but I'm just going to pop them off. Okay, and then we can just string it closed. And I'm going to go through from the other side. I'm going to take my yarn up here too, through. There we go. And I'm just going to pull it in from this side. And there we go. And I'm going to hold it nice and tight, and then I'm just going to sew it in. If you want to be more secure, you can go around a lot of times. I'm just going to go around a couple. I'm just kind of sewing around in a circle. Oop. And of course, my yarn came off my needle. Bad yarn, bad needle. Okay, stay on. Okay. There we go, and then I'm just gonna stick my yarn in and tie a knot. And put it through a couple more times because I'm on the wrong side, so it doesn't have to be super neat. And just tie it off, and then you can weave it in if you want. I just tend to cut them short, leave them in there, and there you go. So it's pretty soft bind off. And here's what the hat looks like. It's a pretty nice hat, I think. Turned out very nice. Happy with it. So there it is. And then the other thing you want to do is take your yarn, and I've got this big long one. Just gotta find what I have. My scissors. Let's cut this big long one. Like, I just tend to usually just leave them like that. And I'm gonna put this one in here. And I want to, it depends sometimes on the hat, you just want to fold it under, but the way this one is woven, I can just sort of look at the way the pattern goes and just put it through. And there, just goes right in with the edge. And then I'm going to want to weave it in, weave it through a few things. And I want to tie a knot because I want to make sure that this does not come undone. Oh. There we go. And then I'm just going to keep weaving it, and I'm going to weave it along here. Just going through a few threads here and there. I don't really want to go down the body of the hat because this is so nice and lacy here. And there. Pull it through. And then I'm just going to cut it. And that's it. And there's the hat. And yeah, you've got a really nice, nice looking brim here. Cast on is really nice looking, and there's your brim style, and perfect hat to fit me, my size. So you might want to make it longer for your size, or use the bigger loom if you have a bigger head. And so there you go. I hope you enjoyed the video. Have fun making your hat, and I will see you next time.